to season 2. Season 1 was all about learning for me how to do a podcast, and for the guests about what mattered to them when it came to culture, leadership and EVP. I've made it my mission over the last 11 years, 12 years within further education recruitment to learn so much about people, culture, what makes the organisations tick, and ultimately try and bring you podcasts with people that really make a difference. As we move into season 2, it's become more of a conversation. So you'll notice that the style is more relaxed, that we are about putting these leaders at ease and learning the best parts of their journey. Some of the challenges that they've faced, some of the amazing people that they've met, some of the incredible outcomes that they've produced. Season 2 is about some of the best conversations I think you've got to hear. And we have so many exciting guests, so many really passionate, incredibly experienced people that are going to add so much value if you take the time to listen to this podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the page and follow to learn more. Hello and welcome to Culture and Leadership Podcast. Today we are hosted by the wonderful Chichester College Group, and today we have Shelagh Legrave, the FE Commissioner, with us. Sheila, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be back here because I was principal here for nearly 12 years and I worked here for nearly 20 years. So it's a place that is very special to me. I have been the FE Commissioner for the last 4 years and I look after the 200 plus colleges who are designated as further education institutions in further education.
Oh wow, and that's a long time in FE. Is that nearly 40 years?
No. So in my background, I started off as an army officer for 6 years. I worked for an investment bank for 12 years. I worked for a university for 5 years. And then I came into further education. So I will have spent about 25 years in education in its broadest sense.
Wow, that's a background. That is a very varied background. There's so much skill set to bring. The army officer bit's very exciting. So then, how did you then end up from banking, army, into higher education and then into colleges? What drew you into further education?
I can't say that I set out in my career to go into education. When I left university, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I joined the army, spent 6 years doing a short service commission. But I have to say it framed my leadership experience and what I firmly believed in. The Sandhurst model is serve to lead. And that's something that I think is the right way round in terms of leadership. I could only have done an eight years in the army. At 6 years, I looked for something else. I sent a whole load of cold letters in those days out, and I got a job in the city running their switchboard and telex centre because I had done that in the army for one of my jobs. And I qualified as an accountant while I was there. So my route into education was through finance.
Yep.
I went to the University of Roehampton as their finance director once I got married, because marriage and working in the city just were incompatible. I worked far too long hours. And I spent 5 years at the university, and then I was pregnant. We moved down to Midhurst, which is just outside Chichester, and I looked for a local job. And everybody said to me, don't go and work in a further education college because the finances are complex and it's not very well funded. But I thought it was a challenge.
Yep.
And so I became the finance director or chief financial officer in 2003 here at Chichester.
Yeah, and then you were the principal here. So when did that shift from CFO to principal happen?
Well, I suppose 2 or 3 years after I arrived, the then principal said to me, you could be my successor. And at that stage, I had a 3-year-old son. And I said, don't think I could be. I don't think I could ever get the right work-life balance. But obviously, my son grew up. And I was able to commit a bit more time here. And when he eventually announced he was retiring, there was a lot of pressure to apply for the role. I was up against 9 people who were already principals. So I was astounded when the governing body said that they wanted me to be the next principal.
What a privilege.
It was a privilege. It is a privilege.
And so we've done FE 25 years. We're now the FE commissioner. What motivates you personally to do that role, to be across so many different colleges? What took you there?
While I was at Chichester, we achieved 2 outstanding Ofsteds, of which I was very proud, and we expanded the college group. So originally it was 2 colleges. By the time I left, it was 5 colleges. It's now 2 more have been added on. At that stage, it was just around the COVID point. So we were inspected in March 2020 and we went into lockdown in April 2020. The then FE commissioner said to me, would I consider the role? I'm sure he said this to several other people as well. And I thought about it, chatted to my husband, knew it would be a national role, had some experience with national colleges because I'd chaired something called 157 Group, what was then became Collab Group, which was a group that looked after large colleges. And I thought, well, I'm coming to the end of my career. Maybe this is something that I should aspire to do. And I've always wanted to give back. And I've always wanted to talk to other colleges about what they were doing and share practice. And so I applied, and much to my surprise, Gavin Williamson, who was then the Secretary of State, offered me the role.
Amazing. You've now done that for coming up to 4 years. What's the most exciting part about that role? What's the bit that keeps you fired up?
Undoubtedly, working with colleges. So I've got 4 bits to the role, one of which is working with civil servants and talking about policy and bringing a practitioner view to policy, which is really important. Right. One bit is helping colleges that are in trouble and go into something called intervention, where we have to support them. One bit is around helping colleges to meet their local skills needs, and that's only because it was introduced when I first started the role. It was part of the Ofsted framework. But the 4th bit has been developing active support for colleges.
To kind of avoid intervention.
To avoid intervention, but also wherever you are in your life as a college, you've always got things to learn. It's a continuous improvement. And that is where I believe I have a strength. I enjoy going to talk to colleges about where some of their difficulties lie and how we can share them. And even if they are an outstanding sixth form colleges, there will still be things, or a general further education college, there will still be things that they want to improve.
It sounds to me like the bit that you love the most is the proactive bit.
I love working with people, and I really enjoy sharing practice from different colleges. So I'm not saying this is all driven from me, because obviously I've only had a certain experience, and managing a college in an inner city is a different situation to manage a college in a leafy shire, albeit that Chichester had Crawley, which is sort of outer London,
yes,
as part of it, the group. And so I think it's signposting colleges to talk to other colleges. We've done quite a lot of work around governance, which is always quite a tricky area, because knowing what good governance looks like is hard.
Very difficult.
But it's also, we've got a mentoring programme. It's encouraging people to come and be principals. I'd always say to everyone, it's the best job I ever did.
And that's really interesting, because I do a lot of work across the further education space, and I've yet to find someone to say, no, I don't want to share that piece of information.
No.
So it's not like in the private sector where I wouldn't openly publish a list of my entire client list. I would keep that to myself. I wouldn't help a competitor in too many ways. I'd support them in a broad context if it was good for the industry. But in FE, I can grab a head of marketing from one college, introduce them to a head of marketing in another, and they will share and share alike, because nobody's really in competition for the student outcome. I think it's shared, and that's interesting that might be coming from you, driving that ethos.
Possibly. I still think there's competition, and in certain parts of England there hasn't been much in terms of mergers, and therefore there are local colleges fighting for students.
Yes.
In the south, we've had much more consolidation, so that it is less the case. I think the challenge for many colleges is ensuring that they offer the right course for to the right student.
Yeah, meeting the skills need. And
but also ensuring that, I mean, so often when you're 16, you don't know what you want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 22. So it's working with that student to show them the opportunities. And let's face it, in 2025, we have no idea what the job market will look like in 2035.
Addressing the skills need by putting your finger in the air and saying, I think it's going to land like this. We have to deal, and there's two things for FE. The only constant is change.
Yes.
As you've just said, they're constantly innovating. They have to talk to each other. They have to progress because nothing stays the same.
No.
And secondly, that we're training for the future. And we have to get people work ready as we understand it to be today. We can only deal with what's in front of us and what the funding rules allow. And there's so much challenge in that. Even if you think something's coming, we can't work to that. In your lengthy career, and very impressive, might I add, what's been the highlight? If you can, maybe one, maybe two highlights so far, bits that you can say that was amazing.
I think the outstanding Ofsteds were one of my highlights, and that's because although Ofsted is only a judgment, and you don't spend your life as a leader thinking outstanding Ofsted is my one goal, because what your one goal is an outstanding student experience. Yeah. But what it brings to your college is the recognition that you're doing a fantastic job. When I became the principal, Chichester College requires improvement, although it was called satisfactory in those days. I said to the governors when I was interviewed, the next time we're inspected will be outstanding. I'm not sure they believed me. But for the staff, for the students, for everybody, it is such an accolade. So I think that has been very, very special. I think the other really special moment was when we won for a second time what's called the Queen's Anniversary Prize, although it's now called the Queen Elizabeth Prizes for Education, because it's across HE and FE, and it's presented by the King, and it is the Oscar of prizes. In fact, you can win a Beacon Award, but which the AOC judge, but that's more around effective practice. What the Queen's Anniversary Prize is, what do you do that is unique, that has made a change to your local area, possibly to your national area or internationally? The college had won it in 2005 for its international work, and just as I was leaving, in fact, I had left by the time Andy was told we won it. It was awarded for furniture making.
Amazing. That is, I'd never even heard of that award, and I've been in FE for 12 years, or was supporting FE for 12 years. So that's how rare it is that comes along. And that's yes, I would say that was a fantastic accolade. It's interesting, Ofsted back-to-back, outstanding twice. I've heard of something called the kind of outstanding swagger. So there's the cultural, both good and bad, that you get once you get outstanding, that people then sometimes go, well, we're outstanding, it's going to come again. So I think it's even more impressive that you got it once and then twice in succession and retained it, because that's a difficult thing to manage, partly why we're going to talk a little bit about culture.
Yes, I think the culture of continuous improvement is something that you've got to hold at the forefront of what you're doing. There's no way you can sit back and say, I got an outstanding Ofsted, or we got an outstanding Ofsted, so we're all fantastic. And actually, there's a real danger in that, yes. That when I first came here, there was a area in the college that had received outstanding in the days when individual curriculum areas received a grade. And they sat on that for some time thinking we are outstanding. And it took a bit of time to change that culture.
Yeah, see, I know it wasn't totally made up.
No.
So in this impressive career, you must have had some influences, some people that have shaped your ethos towards it. Is there anyone that you can think of that was like, I take bits from that? That's someone that I admire, or a role model maybe?
Yeah, when I was at, it was then called Roehampton Institute, it's now the University of Roehampton, I had an extraordinary head. She was called the rector. in those days, as opposed to the Vice-Chancellor, who was a Roman Catholic nun. And in fact, the college was made up of 4 teacher training colleges, 3 of which had a religious affiliation. The 4th was Frobel. But she intellectually had spent a lot of time thinking about leadership, but she also was able, in a very practical way, to work with her senior management team, of which I was one, to create a distributed leadership way of working that has influenced me when I came here. So I think she was my biggest influence, apart from possibly my grandfather, who died when I was about 13, but had been very philanthropic, but a very successful businessman.
The key to, and I think some of the keys is that people forget that education is a business. Yes, we have students. Yes, we are government funded, but we are in the business of education.
Yes.
And I think that makes sense, because I've heard that said a few times. So I think moving into culture, and sort of by its very nature, I kind of want you to talk to me a little bit about whether there is a synonymous culture across further education that you can recognise from your position, or whether each organisation has truly unique feels to it. And that's not a trick question, because I imagine that we've seen the same values across some colleges, but they apply different feels. So I just want to see what you see.
Yeah. My view is you will never have exactly the same culture in each organisation, because place matters, and place will, to some extent, determine the culture, but also individual leaders absolutely make a difference. And if I look at colleges that have got into difficulty, not across the board, because sometimes it's just because the government doesn't fund their particular speciality, but in many cases it's because the leadership wasn't quite right and hadn't established the right culture. So I don't think you will see certainly shared values, but you will never see exactly the same culture in every institution.
So I guess then, starting with an even bigger question to restart, how important is culture within a further education setting to you?
It's essential if you're going to deliver outstanding student experience. And it's essential because in further education, you're not paid very well as a teacher. So you absolutely need to feel valued. You need to understand what it is that your institution is trying to achieve. And then you need to understand your part in it. And there needs to be a very sympathetic, not cosy, but sympathetic leadership that allows, at every level, individuals to feel valued, to be given flexibility. You need to align the vision, mission, people across the organisation and policies in terms of the way they're applied in order to achieve a really positive culture. And I always say to people, if you don't like people, I'm not sure how successful you're going to be as a leader of a college, because that is certainly for me, empathetic leadership is really, really important. But people want to be well led, so they want the leader to show some of the characteristics of good leadership. They want to have decisions made at appropriate times. They want to be consulted at appropriate times. But they also want their individual line manager to be doing that as well, and the individual line manager to be able to make decisions on their own. So it's a complex issue, and a lot of those strands will be common in all institutions who have a positive culture. But the way that they manifest themselves will be different.
You, I think, quite deliberately left out the word purpose there when talking about it. Do you think that all colleges have the same overarching purpose, which is an outstanding student experience?
Yes, I do. But It's the same purpose, but it might be nuanced depending on the sort of students that you're teaching. So, I mean, whether you're teaching, you're in a specialist institution that's supporting students with learning challenges, or you're in an elite sixth form college that is incredibly oversubscribed and you're only taking about a fifth of the people who apply to you, the purpose of an outstanding student experience will be the same, but again, how it plays out in what you're actually trying to achieve will be slightly different.
Very interesting. And there are a few more pickups, but that's a fantastic answer, because I think, yes, we would all share in wanting that fantastic thing, but what's fantastic is different regionally and in different settings. You talked a lot there about leadership and leadership needing to be strong and people needing to come and be able to grip it. Partly some of the problems I see is middle leadership.
Yeah.
And not all of those problems are caused by senior leadership, though they are ultimately accountable and responsible. They have a good culture. The culture makes sense, but the standards and the behaviours can't make it past middle leadership. Is that something that you see across colleges? Or?
Well, when I first came to Chichester, I was astounded to find that the middle leaders had been promoted because they were good teachers, but they weren't given any sort of professional development as to how they were then supposed to lead and manage. And I was incredibly fortunate when I worked at the bank, the investment bank, to be given the opportunity to do a number of different continuous professional development courses. And one of them I did included an assessment centre, 360-degree appraisal, that sort of approach. So I asked the then principal, can I find a consultant and introduce this? Because I think it would be incredibly helpful to support our middle managers. And I would say that made such a difference to the way the college operated. And there's much more of an understanding of that now, I think, than there was when I came in the early 2000s across many institutions. And a lot of middle managers have been given significant amounts of professional development. But I think it's so important. I think middle management, and we've all been, well, I've been there, I've been a middle manager, is a very difficult place to be, because you've got to manage downwards and you've got to manage upwards. And some middle managers find one or other of those things to be quite difficult. And then you've got to give them strategies to approach that and work out how they can make the best of both of those without having a political culture where everybody feels that they have to influence upwards or they can only say certain things. It's got to be really transparent, the way that you operate within a middle management team. People have to feel that they're honest and express themselves, but at the same time, they have to understand the competencies around their middle management.
And I think I'd echo that. In the colleges that have chosen to invest strongest in sort of learning development, where their managers have had manager training, where we train managers on interviewing, on culture, ironically, where we see the most investment is where we see the best results.
Yes.
And it's somewhat, but I understand why it can be a forgotten thing, because you think they are a brilliant teacher, they are passionate, they have all the skills, they'll go and seek out what they need, and we're all so busy. But if you just take them down a little bit and you say, right, this is how we're going to invest in you and this is your pathway, you do see a much better result for all parts involved.
Yeah, and there are various aspects of this. So you've got the technical skills that you need. So how do you timetable efficiently? How do you ensure you've got good class utilisation? How do you understand your budget? Those are technical skills you need as a manager, and you need to have the opportunity to learn them. But you also need the people skills. How do you ensure that everybody is listened to, that people are given the flexibility they need because they may have some complication at home, they may have small children, you need to be able to work around that. You also need to set the boundaries so people understand exactly what they can and can't do.
Yep. Without stifling innovation. It's so
absolutely. It's a really complex area.
Yeah.
My Bible, well, not my Bible because that's slightly different, but the book that I started reading and have spent the most time revisiting is Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Good to Great.
Because he did a fantastic amount of research on which American companies did really well over a number of years. And he picked up a whole host of aspects that we could then, that he drew out, that you could then apply in any circumstances. And I think it gives you a very good framework in which to lead.
For you and for the audience, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, Marshall Goldsmith. Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
So that's the book. It's all about culture. And it's about recognising the culture that got you to where you were. It's fantastic. It's brilliant. It's got you where you are. And that is wonderful. But where you want to go to next is going to take a whole new heap of things.
Yeah.
And it follows really nicely from Jim Collins. It's a brilliant next piece of the puzzle. Very short book.
Yeah.
But because you don't want to disrespect what's happened, because actually that got you there. Good or bad, it got you where you were. It's just how do we get here?
Yeah.
And I think you'd really enjoy that book.
But I think also you've got to think about how you interact in your team. So one of the books that we used in my latter years here was Leon Coney's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which talks about the need, first of all, not to halo a point, so not to appoint somebody that looks like you, because you'll never actually achieve what you want to achieve. I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm not so good at. But secondly, allow a really positive culture of questioning, because you won't get the innovation if you don't allow different people to work together. And then your role as the chief executive is making certain that you achieve the very best from all those individuals.
Fantastic. That makes total sense. Pulling us back into culture, I asked you how important culture was. We talked a little bit about culture. Where does culture show up most importantly within a further education setting?
You can, when you walk through a door for college, you can often, most of the time, get a view as to whether you've got a positive culture in that organisation or not. And actually it starts at reception.
Very front door.
So I know the reception staff here because they're still pretty similar to when I worked here. But I can remember we worked very hard on ensuring that everybody realised that customer service, that actually how you treat the customer was very, very important. And sometimes I go into colleges and it's a slightly brush off, and I think, you're not valuing me as the customer, so you may not be valuing your students either. So
to broaden that answer, with my assumption is that you feel it in the very fabric and it influences almost everything.
It influences everything in an organisation.
In your view, and this will be a difficult one because you span so much, but in your view, what elements of culture, what values or what behaviours have you seen that genuinely influence student outcomes?
Personalisation is probably the most important aspect of student outcomes. So as a teacher, and I have never been a teacher, and I admire the way good teachers do this, but you've got to understand each individual student, where their strengths are, where they need to develop, what they need as a trick of the trade to ensure that they pass the exam, because exam preparation is everything. And I think if you can focus on that personalisation, and it's similar even when you become, the chief executive, you've got to personalise your conversations with people. Yes, of course, you've got to talk about the objectives that you want them to achieve, and you've got to make sure you can measure them, and you've got to follow up, and they've got to complete the task, all of which, are aspects of being a good manager. But you've got to work out how you deal with that individual.
I think I got that from Preston College. And it's a phrase I've used for the last 5 years, and it's meet them where they are. And that
Yes.
it doesn't matter what we're talking about or how we're talking about it. You have to meet the person where they are. You can't use words they don't understand. You can't greet them with emotions they won't get. You can't give them instructions they don't know how to do. We have to take each person, and I guess that's personalisation goes even further than that, and it's uniquely to everyone. But meet them where you are is a very FE phrase, and it's one that I've called.
I like that phrase, and I think it's really important.
So, what challenges then do you see with everything changing around us? We've got a cost of living crisis, we've got changing qualifications, changing funding landscapes, AI. How does that impact someone trying to have a culture that kind of doesn't bend or change to that? Is culture separate to all those issues? Can culture ignore everything that goes on, or does it have to be that kind of anchor? I don't know, it's a discussion.
I think culture pervades everything, but actually what you do with the information that you have is a separate subject. So I think the culture needs to be open, ready to take on new ideas, ready to share, ready to learn. And all of those lend itself to being able to deal with change. Change is scary for some people. And I've worked with many people who really don't like change. I've worked with people who would love to change every other week and get bored quite easily. So people have different approaches to how they perceive change. But as long as your culture is flexibility, and you can be flexible in dealing with the next change. And that's what happens in education.
Yes,
education is a very political subject, and in each successive government and even each successive minister will have a different view as to where they want to focus. So I think the culture is a really important aspect of that. If you've got a very closed culture, then you will not be ready for the next change in qualification. And if I look across the sector, I've got some colleges who are shying away from AI, who hope to goodness that the qualifications that they're currently delivering are still going to be funded. And you've got other colleges who understand that there's going to be change and have embraced that and started to try and work out what the future looks like.
I had to say this to my team the other day. I said we can run from AI and hope it doesn't catch us, but we'd be running from a lot, or we can embrace it and see where the opportunity takes us. And I think that's the same for any change. I understand that FE must have whiplash sometimes with the number of changes at the speed at which change occurs. But I guess if you haven't baked that into your culture, then it will feel like you're battling against the wind. You kind of have to, it's like when they build buildings for earthquakes. There's always a little bit of sway to go with the challenges that we're faced. So you must work with so many colleges that go through or require a change in culture. So I guess this could almost be the biggest question of the podcast, but what are the most successful tips that those that do it well have done? What have they done to change that culture? How do they embed it better, or what's the process they go through?
I think it has to start with your vision and mission. So although culture eats strategy for breakfast is a phrase that lots of different organisations have recognised over the years, but when you're going in new to your organisation, first of all, you've got to ensure that you have a vision and mission that people can buy into, and a strategy that people understand, can contribute to, and feel they've been listened. That in itself is a route in to establishing a positive culture. And then I think it is a matter of professional development in ensuring that, and setting values as well. What are most colleges, or in fact, every college I think I've been to has got a set of values. We've got Chichester College has got a set of values here, and we've changed them over the years. But essentially, they've got to be values that everybody lives every day.
I thought you might get to lived values.
And in fact, one of the important aspects of that is when you're doing an annual appraisal or a 6-monthly appraisal, that you have an appraisal process that allows you to measure whether or not you're living your values. And in fact, that was something where there's this college I'm sitting in has a matrix approach to its appraisal and actually looks at what are the values and what behaviours should they drive and how do you measure up to those behaviours. So I think I would always start with mission, vision and strategy. Bring your governors on board because governors are really important in setting strategy, but then work with your staff in how they operate in practice. And I'm in favour of a set of values and a set of behaviours that shows how that works.
I don't think the two are separate in the slightest. No. So I was asked to explain culture to a group of leaders at a college recently. And I said to them, culture is nothing. Culture is standards and behaviours. And each value will drive a different standard or a different behaviour. You can have multiple behaviours and standards that go into that value. But if you just give values, then it gives people carte blanche to interpret them.
Exactly.
Without I'm going to avoid the word framework.
Yeah.
Because I find that if you prescribe behaviours and standards, it's almost as bad as prescribing values. They have to be lived. They have to be organic to the organisation. But if you can get people talking about that's not for the benefit of CCG, that's not the CCG way. No. That is the CCG way. So when we're trying to improve standards and behaviours, we want people saying that's not the way we do things. That is the way we do things. That's not the way you speak to someone. This is the way you speak to someone. That's not the way you leave the kitchen. That's not the way you start the day. This is the way you start the day. And if the more of that you get, the more you get people to align to a strategy, which is what it is, it does, you're right, culture will absolutely be strategy for breakfast. We have a thing in my office where no matter what office I'm in, I'm always in before the first person starts and I'm always out after the last person's there because that's my rule. But every time someone comes to the door, it's good morning. And every time they leave, it's good night.
And I think that's really important. Funnily enough, when I became the college principal, my predecessor had always started meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning. And it was very clear that the senior team found that quite hard. Now, I'm very much a morning person, so I was always in at 7 and started work. But I was perfectly happy to flex the meeting start point to a bit later in the day. Equally, it was really important that people felt able to go home.
Yeah.
So, in fact, when I worked in the city, there were many, many examples where to gain promotion, you had to be the last to leave. Now, I think that is the wrong culture.
Productive.
Entirely the wrong culture.
Yeah.
And you come to do a job. If you've managed to do that job and obviously you have to work the hours that you're supposed to be working. I mean, I'm not saying it's entirely flexible, but it's absolutely not a requirement to be seen there. But equally, I used to work long hours and I was often, leaving later on in the evening. But also, of course, in an education establishment, you have evening classes. Yep. So there will be people who will be here till 10 o'clock.
And also, I think there's this modern, slightly interesting misconception of what visibility means. I've had a couple of conversations strongly around the fact that being visible doesn't mean being physically in person. It means that people know what you would be saying, that you are contactable, that you're available. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to beat the grounds of every campus. Now, you can't just ignore the physicality.
COVID taught us such a lot about the importance of communication, which you can certainly do on a screen, but equally, people really wanted to be together. So I think there is a balance. It's important that you are seen, but equally, you're absolutely right. Colleagues will know that you're working as hard as they are, and that's what they want to know.
Yes, yeah, and I totally agree with it. I just think there's a healthy balance between the two. You shouldn't need to totally compromise on everything just to be seen, because it's useless to just be seen. So this is quite an interesting question. I mean, I hope these are all interesting questions for the audience, but for me, it's what impact does external bodies like Ofsted, like the Department for Education, like City and Guilds, like the qualification providers, what impact do they have on college culture, if any?
Well, all those bodies drive behaviours. And some of those behaviours, and I've seen it quite recently, can be probably unacceptable in achieving the aim they were trying to achieve. So I've seen colleges trying to achieve an outstanding Ofsted and then cutting corners in a way that they shouldn't be doing. So I think you have to ensure that you understand what the requirements are of all those bodies, but also that you interpret them in a way that works for your organisation. And if you've got to work within the rules. We've had plenty of colleges who've been caught out because they haven't worked within the rules. But as long as you know what the rules are, you have the flexibility, and it's important that people feel they have the flexibility. It comes back to that personalisation of the student journey.
Colour between the lines.
Yeah.
We get taught it as children. We get taught it a lot, and I understand pressures have a part to play, and I don't judge anyone who has the tough job of running a college, but I definitely think colouring between the lines and understanding. If you don't know, would you say just ask?
Yeah.
I get the sense, Sheila, in this conversation that you would be welcome to a call if someone said they weren't sure on something.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes you need to have somebody else you can call and say, have you ever come across this? Yeah. When I first became a principal, after about 2 years, we had some staff in South Korea, and the North Koreans, because we did a lot of international work, the North Koreans decided to drop a bomb on an island, one of the islands of South Korea. And I can remember somebody ringing me up, and I wasn't in college, I was somewhere else, and saying, do you think we should bring those staff home? I thought, well, I don't know. How safe do the staff feel? Do they feel that they want to come home?
What a crazy question.
But it's very difficult to predict those sorts of scenarios. And I think in that situation, I think I probably rang my chair of governors and say, this is the problem that's been posed, what would you do? And we talked through it. In the end, the staff stayed there, and it was absolutely fine.
Yeah. Of all the questions I thought you were going to come out with, it wasn't, do we need to pull our staff back from South Korea? But we are where we are. You've got such a varied background. And was I surprised to hear you say that you had some army and you had... Probably not. But this question does lead me to an interesting one, which is, where can FE learn the most from in terms of institutions, organisations or sectors about culture? Where should it be looking?
I think culture is very personal to an organisation, but I think you can learn the mechanisms by which leaders and managers have established the culture of their organisations by going to talk to them. Yeah. Before I became the principal, I went round a number of different colleges to try and understand what they had done to achieve a positive culture. So I think definitely peer organisations. Sometimes, however, it's learning from a corporate.
Yeah.
When I worked in the city, I would say the culture was all about earning money
in a rich man's world.
It wasn't about valuing people or even any sort of political correctness. When I first came here, I was introduced as the token woman, senior manager.
I heard about this.
But you can learn things from other organisations, and there are some companies and charities who are very well known for positive cultures. Go and talk to those CEOs.
Sheila, we've had a lovely conversation about culture. And you alluded at the beginning that leadership has a huge part to play. So let's talk a little bit about what good leadership looks like in further education. So what are some of the best characteristics that you've seen that have been most useful for leaders?
I think, first of all, it's identifying the competencies that you need and being very clear in your mind what's most important at a particular time. Over the years, there's been a shift from an autocratic leadership, which was certainly what I experienced when I first came into further education. And actually, I think if you went more widely, was the case sort of in the late 90s, whatever, to a much more empathetic, democratic type of leadership, and where there's an authentic nature of it, but where people feel that they can operate without being told. I think there are times when tell is important, and sometimes leaders forget that, and then the organisation loses its focus entirely.
You don't have to be liked.
And you will have some very difficult things to do as a leader. Every leader does. But I think over time, there's been much more of a recognition that there are competencies that you need, and you need to think about how you use them and when. We've been incredibly fortunate over the last probably 8 to 10 years that there has been some funding to support further education leadership through the Education and Training Foundation.
Yes.
And they have run some really excellent courses at Said Business School, where people have come together and invested time in thinking about leadership and thinking about the different aspects and how you use some of their skills in different scenarios. And that's been incredibly helpful. And I do believe we have a much better set of leaders across the board in further education as a result of that investment. And I always say to people who are new to leadership, make sure that you apply to go on that programme.
And that, again, to maybe this is the answer I took from that, which is that when you're looking at a leadership role, you need to look at the complementary skill sets of all the other leaders, because the skill sets of a broad spectrum, one person isn't going to ever have it all.
No. And I know myself, I mean, I'm not a great marketeer. Sometimes I can think outside the box, but not all the time. In the end, I'm an accountant, and therefore I'm reasonably good at finishing things off. I'm reasonably good at detail, and I'm certainly good at maths. Possibly sometimes less the case that I'm good at expressing myself, and it's taken time to learn that skill. And therefore, I think leaders need to appreciate a breadth of skills, but they absolutely need to make certain that their team brings those different competencies. And people will be good at some things and not at others.
And so then being an FE leader, that's a unique position, unique to FE. How does that differ, do you think, from being a leader in schools, higher education? How does it differ from being a leader of a bank? What are the different pressures that being a leader in FE brings?
Well, I actually believe the competencies in all those different organisations are still important, but how you operate them in practice will be different. But I think in further education, leadership needs to be much more flexible in the way it deals with the different policy chains. If we look at higher education over the number of years, the basic degree has stayed the same. The way it's funded has changed a bit, although not actually, in fact, not sufficiently perhaps.
Are you one of the few people that understands the funding model?
But it's much more simple than the funding in further education, which is complicated because there are different age ranges and different courses are funded for different ages and
different uplifts,
and there are many. A much larger group of programmes in the first place. So I think specifically to FE, you've got to be really mindful that government policy drives change pretty fast. And you've also got to be aware that we're not very well funded as a sector. Yep. Schools are better funded, universities traditionally have been better funded, and therefore you've got to be able to cope with the financial pressures. And many a time people have criticised me for thinking too much about the money and not necessarily about the student experience, but unfortunately what you can't afford to do is run out of money.
And also, even all the best money in the world won't buy you a best student experience. You could have all of the money in the world and be very unhappy. And I'm sure you could have all of the funding, you could have double the funding and still not deliver a good student experience.
Possibly, but I do think teachers deserve to be paid well, and they don't deserve to have a 10,000 gap between what you can earn in a school and what you can earn in a college for teaching the same subject.
Massively. And I think they also deserve to be trained properly. I think one of the biggest challenges, interesting, Sheila, we could really go into this because I've had a couple of battles, because I walk into every conversation where I say, when I'm talking about hiring people, when I'm talking about building hiring pipeline, talent and succession, the first thing I say is we haven't got any money, and I respect that. So then what else can we do? So I think for another day, there's a whole conversation around, yes, we haven't got any money, but what else can we do?
Yeah.
Because not you and not I are able to change the funding rules.
No, and I think you have got to be aware of what you can't influence. So I do see some leaders continually battling against the next change that the government's likely to bring in. You can waste a lot of energy doing that.
Yeah.
You've got to be pragmatic and say, well, that is the next change. So how am I actually going to approach and deliver something that meets the demands of that particular change? So you need to be flexible. I think also, I mean, in the commercial sense, you could go into a company that needs somebody who is a brilliant salesman, who is absolutely fantastic at building the product and therefore building the income. You don't have that driver in further education. And it's something that I really enjoyed when I worked in the city. Yeah. But you don't you need to ensure that you're using your money to the best possible way you can.
I will discuss the three different things that I see against money, just because I think it's important. You might have some insight for me. The first and biggest barrier that we find, not money, after money is the biggest barrier, is training. So we bring people in, we give them, maybe they've just come off the tools, they were level 3 in their chosen trade, and they've been doing that for 20, 25 years, they've got good experience. And we throw them on a cert ed, we throw them into a full teaching timetable, and we lose them inside a year. That's the second biggest issue. The third one I see is poor culture, poor onboarding. We offer people a job, we get them through the door, and we onboard them. We fail to even train them on the basic, easiest parts of accessing a business. In any normal business, we would have given them a week of onboarding, 2 days of onboarding, and they'd know where to find the toilets or the fire escape. Yeah. And sometimes I find that that's all they know, and there's not a lot of investment. And the fourth thing that I find is that we don't sell the sector.
No.
So I exist as not as Guy, but as Guy, the CEO of Dovetail and Slate, to sell the sector, to champion the sector. And I go out, and some people do a fantastic job of all these things. But the biggest, most common themes I see is we don't sell the sector, we don't onboard them well enough, and we don't keep them longer than a year.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And that onboarding is so crucial. You shouldn't be bringing somebody in to teach in a college without giving them some time off to do their cert ed, without giving them a mentor, without probably co-teaching for a couple of 2 or 3 lessons, because teaching is a profession in itself. There are still some colleges who don't put all their staff through a teaching qualification who are teaching. And that's not something I support, because I think you need to learn those skills, as you would do in any profession.
But you put them on, so what we've recommended, and we're about to be educated if we're wrong, we recommend that you put them onto an entry-level teaching qualification for their first period of training. So before you put them onto a cert ed, I say put them through an AET. So that actually we're laddering someone up, as we would do if they were a trainee teacher through to a main grade lecturer. We're saying, we recognise where you are today, we meet you and we personalise it to where you are, and then we bring you through. And that process, yes, it elongates the period. And I know that colleges don't have any money, and I always understand when I make a recommendation that some of this will be, we've got no money, we've got no time. And I just partly sometimes think that we need to bring it up a little bit, look at the whole soup.
But you're right, you need to progress through a qualification. For some people, it depends what they're teaching, and it depends what they've been doing previously. For some people, actually going straight into a cert ed is exactly what they need. But but there are other courses where somebody teaching that particular course probably can't manage that.
So the next interesting part of FE is leaders having to design vision and mission and inspiration and bring that to an organisation. We haven't got any money. So where do leaders go to learn more about where this comes from? Is that another peer-related thing, or is there somewhere else they can go?
Well, we've worked in the FE Commissioner, which is a team, it's not just me, to produce some effective practice guides. And actually, we're soon going to produce an effective practice guide around a strategy and how you start to rewrite your strategy, how you monitor it, how you keep it refreshed, etc. And I think that those effective practice guides are really important. We have also done an effective practice guide around culture.
Yep.
And so I think you do need to learn from your peers, but you also, you can learn by reading about how other people have approached it. You can talk. Strategy is something that every company does. So there are lots of role models. What I would say is don't sit in a darkened room and write it on your own, because that will never be an effective strategy.
Yep.
And draw on your governors. Your governors will have masses of expertise that they can also contribute to that. But so will your staff. And, if you're a professional marketeer, you've often learned an awful lot about how you put together effective strategies. So never do it on your own.
Yeah, fantastic. Interesting you didn't tell them to listen to this podcast to learn more about culture, but that's fine. How do you see leaders best engaging and empowering staff at every level?
Leaders have to empower people. In order to empower people, they've got to train their middle leaders to take on that responsibility, and all the way down to course leadership, and all the way down to the person who is doing your public relations or other roles in business support. And people have got to feel empowered, and that means setting a whole load of structures in place, setting the boundaries, ensuring that individuals know what their objectives are, measuring them effectively, but also giving them the latitude in how they actually deliver them. And I think if you have that ladder of learning in terms of leadership, as well as the ladder of learning in terms of courses that people can do, and from the top down, you're demonstrating how important it is that they take their role and that you're good at delegating. And that's a very interesting skill that some people are not particularly good at. Yeah. Then I think it will work effectively.
Interesting. So the next biggest challenge I see quite a lot of in FE is recruitment and retention. Now, you meet lots of different colleges. What's the thing that stands out in those colleges that do retention really well that you could shout about? You don't have to shout out a college, but just in general.
Place matters, first of all.
Yeah.
So there are areas of the country where there's significant unemployment now. It's much easier to recruit and retain staff, particularly on the trades, if you've got a higher unemployment. Just naturally, and I've seen recessions where we've gained a whole load of staff, and then the building trade takes off and you lose a whole load of staff. Yep. So I think that is an aspect that some people haven't necessarily appreciated. But I suppose most importantly, it is about people feeling valued. Mm-hmm. And if you give them the flexibility, and I do think this is important. I've seen colleges where, the rule is you've got to be in the college for 9 to 5. And even if you've got various things happening at home, you're not given the flexibility to go home and deal with that. Well, we're all humans, and you have disasters. And they're disasters that you need to go and deal with. So that feeling, making people feel valued, is, to me, the most important part of retention. But how do you bring them through the door? That is a much trickier issue, and I think actually we often need expertise such as you're bringing to the table to ensure that you find the right people, because a lot of people have never heard of a further education college. And to be fair, I'd never heard of it when I was younger, and therefore ensuring that those opportunities are clear to people, and advertising in the right place, and using social media effectively nowadays. All of that aspect is part of good recruitment, but also having a recruitment process that works effectively.
Don't give away all of my trade secrets. I might give them away for free myself, but you've given away most of the good ones there. And I totally agree with that. And I think there is no one-size-fits-all question to the answer of recruitment and retention. And I think it arcs back to what you said at the beginning, which is personalisation. Yeah. Meeting them where they are. It's why adverts can sometimes fail, but on any given day they might work, and context is everything. It's such a melting pot. And do you know what it comes back to? Adaptability.
Adaptability, yes. I think also, on a very practical level, your recruitment process needs to work.
Yes.
So just having an interview with somebody is not necessarily going to bring in the right person. I mean, for our more senior levels here, we've always used focus groups and a variety of different focus groups. But you need more than just an interview to identify that it's the person who's got the skills and attitudes that can make a difference to your organisation.
I echo that. We mirrored the CCG process, and we placed the most recent 2 campus principals at the college. And the process was lengthy and it was formidable, but those that got through it were very appointable.
Yep.
My first order of business, whenever I engage with a college, when I engage with them on a strategic perspective, is to do a 360 employee lifecycle audit. I like to do mine with a whiteboard from end to end, and we just get a full map of every touch point. So literally, how do people discover where we are to how do people leave? Colleges play the infinite game, so they're not, they might change name, but there will be a college in this site in 10, 15, 20 years' time, I hope. And that means that the way people leave is just as important as the way that people join.
Yep.
So whenever I do a process, the first thing I look at is where do we get them and how do we get them to where? And if you can understand that and document it, that is the very first step to solving any of those pain points and problems. And the amount of fun I have fixing those issues, I will leave for another conversation. But they are, when you've done it for as long as I have, you begin to understand the patterns and the trends.
Yeah.
So we've got some good leaders in FE. We've done a fantastic job. What's your advice to those leaders now about to take that big step up? Maybe they've applied to the deputy principal, the CEO, the number one spot, the principal CEO. What's your number one bit of advice before they get there?
Talk to your peers and your the people who work for you and the people in more senior positions and understand exactly how important it is that you bring those skills to the more senior role. Have ambition, but equally have humility. And not every role is right for everybody. No. But equally, there are such huge opportunities in FE, and it's a real privilege to be a senior manager. So and we all have an imposter syndrome. On many occasions, I've been in a place and thought, how on earth did I end up here? And what am I going to say that's of any use to anyone else? So I think recognise that other people will be in that place too, and strengthen your ego. A very strong ego is not the best place to be, but equally, if you don't have any ego at all, then you may struggle with your self-confidence, and you've got to have that confidence. But I do think it is also gaining professional opportunities. Go on every course you can, go and visit other colleges, understand how other people operate, and that will prepare you for that senior position.
Matthew McConaughey said, someone said, don't be so full of yourself. And he was like, well, who else am I supposed to be full of? And I see it, right? Because it's not about ego. It's about confidence. It's self-belief. And where you can cross the line into egotistical. But having that ability to say, I am the person. Yeah. I am the right for this. It is going to work. Massive. So I totally echo that.
But many a case, and actually when I was being interviewed for the FE Commissioner role, I struggled a bit with that. I hadn't been interviewed for years, and I talk a lot about we, because to me it was never me who had delivered a fantastic college. It was a whole team of people, and I found it quite difficult to talk about I. And you have to do that in an interview. So
you have to take credit for things that you've been part of and that you've done. Yeah, 100%. And be strong on it. Yeah. What are your highlights? I always say to people getting ready for an interview, know your weaknesses as well as you know your strengths. Yeah. Massively. Be able to articulate where you are the best. And if someone asks you where you're weak, be able to say, this is what I'm not good at. The amount of people I've tripped up, accidentally or on purpose, in an interview where I've said, what's your biggest weakness? And they've said something utterly awful. Yeah. So I'd always say that those two bits, and that plays in with knowing your development cycle and where you're working. So looking ahead, sort of 5-10 years in the future, what are the biggest cultural and leadership shifts we're going to see in further education?
From a cultural perspective, the technology makes a difference to the way people operate. So when I was growing up, there was no such thing as a PC. Nobody had a mobile phone. Nobody spent all their time looking at social media. I think you've got to be adaptive in the way you lead, recognising that people have a different attention span, that they don't all sit down and read books, or newsletters, that how you communicate. You've got to learn, as technology moves, you've got to learn different ways of communicating with people and engaging with them. Equally, you've got to take on the next technological challenge, and after AI there will be something else, and you've got to embrace it and ensure that you've got somebody with the expertise to use that in your organisation. And then I think it's keeping abreast of which sectors are doing well, where in your local community you need, where there are skills gaps, where you need to encourage people to work, and also that more open careers advice and guidance that gives people at least a taste of what might be to come. You're still going to need that flexibility, that adaptability that we've needed for forever in further education. It's still going to be focused on individual people, but I mean the use of immersion rooms, how you actually share your teaching across different sites, all of that, I mean that's there now, but you've got to adapt your practices to make the very best of the technology that you've got.
It's pretty safe to say that we're in the digital age.
We absolutely are in the digital age, and it does require a different type of leadership where because communication has changed so much over the years.
Massively and dramatically. Sheila, it's been an eye-opening hour. I think maybe slightly longer than that. Very interesting. You've covered off so much. So on behalf of me and the digital audience, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining the podcast, and we wish you all the well in your retirement.
Thank you, Guy, and I've really enjoyed talking to you.